everybody. My name is Jennifer, and I am a librarian with the Hillsborough County Public Library System. And tonight, you're joining me for Resume Basics. So what that's going to look like on our agenda for tonight, we're going to talk about the types of resumes, the format and the language that we should be using on our resumes, headings, object versus profile and what those mean, what skills you should put down and how to word them, any education experience, any work experience, and any additional things you feel like might help you get a job. So first, we're going to talk about the types of resumes there are. So the first one is a chronological resume, and this is traditionally what you see as far as resumes, and it stresses consistent employment within a specific field. So you've worked in the field of education for 20 years. So maybe at different places, but that's how you highlight your skills using a chronological resume. It highlights any promotions you might have had. It can be 1 to 2 pages in length, and it is recommended for those with solid work experience and those who wish to show progression over the course of their career. The next type of resume is a functional resume, and this stresses transferable skills and volunteer experience. It minimizes any gaps in job history, usually maintained on 1 page, and it is recommended for people who have limited or no work experience in a particular field, recent graduates who might not have a lot of experience in the field that they have a degree in, and those with large gaps in employment history for military service, if you've had children, life in general, things happen. This kind of explains those and makes it a little bit easier for future employers to digest. So our first activity, we're going to, you can type your answers in the chat. So essentially, the first question is, what are the 2 main advantages of a functional resume? All right, so essentially a functional resume minimizes gaps in any employment history and highlights transferable skills. So it really focuses on the things that you can do and not so much your history as far as time at certain jobs. All right, and true or false? A chronological resume is the best choice for those who want to show a career progression. And the answer there is true. If you have 20 years of experience doing something, you've had promotions or experienced different aspects of that job at different places that you've worked, a chronological resume is definitely the choice you want to make because it shows that progression over the years. All right. So moving on, we have format and language of our resumes and how we put that together. All right, so some things to consider is the overall readability. Some fonts that you might want to use, your grammar and spelling, making sure that everything makes sense and that you're spelling things correctly. The length of your resume. Remember, 1 to 2 pages if it is a chronological resume and keeping it to 1 if it's a functional resume. The style, including your bullet points and your font and everything, margins and spacing, and your paper or electronic format. So basically, is it readable? Is it presentable? Have you spelled things correctly? Okay, so language, using strong, brief descriptions that are action-focused. Use third-person objective voice and minimizing abbreviations and jargon that need further explanation. Even if you are applying for something in a field that you have a degree in, you've worked for 20 years, the jargon you used at your last place of work may not be the same as we use here. So minimize that just for simplification. So some examples of that using strong brief descriptions are hired, trained, managed production team. Using a third person voice is managed production team. So you're not saying I, you're not saying Jen did, it's third person managed production team. Minimizing abbreviations, member ISTE board. Well, what ISTE board means to you might not mean the same thing to me. All right, so you may need an eye test and you shouldn't have to, the people looking at your resume shouldn't have to use a magnifying glass or take an eye test to see your resume. Everything should be large enough and readable. All right, so here up at the top of the resume to the left, to my left, Everything is really small and scrunched together, but Philip J. Smith on the one to the right, things are highlighted in blue, they're larger, they're easier to see. Same thing with the rest of it. Everything is nice and structured and a little bit easier to read. All right, so for our next activity, and again, you can just put your answers right in the chat. First question is, how long does the average person look at a resume when he or she receives it? So the answer is 5 to 10 seconds. That's all you get. So essentially make sure that your resume looks nice and is succinct, because they're not going to spend 10 minutes looking at it and agonizing over it. The second question is, how long should a resume be? And the answer to that is 1 to 2 pages, depending on which resume you're using. Again, the chronological can be a little bit longer just because you're listing out every job and every experience you've had, while functional can be a little bit shorter and kept to 1 page since you're listing skills that are transferable to the next job. All right, so for our heading on our resume, let's see what that looks like. All right, so some components to consider is heading should include the following pieces of information: your name, your phone number, and your email address. We want them to get a hold of you if they're interested in you. So absolutely, these 3 things, super important to have on your resume. Some things you may also include is your address or a URL for a LinkedIn profile, your website, or any type of portfolio if that's something that you have for like architecture, IT, anything like that. Definitely good to have on there, but not a must. So an example, looking at this, you can see at the top that John Doe, he has exactly what we need: the phone number, the email address, and a LinkedIn profile. The one below it, John Doe, no problem there. It still looks good. He has his phone number, his email address, and his address, and that's perfectly okay. All right, so our next activity. Which piece or pieces of information does not need to be included in a resume heading? Okay, so address is the answer. You can if you want, but you don't have to put it in the heading. It's not as important as the other things like your name and email address and your phone number. Those are necessities. They need to be able to reach you. Second question in our activity, your name in the resume heading should be in a different font than the rest of your resume. Is that true or false? The answer is false. Everything should be cohesive and look nice and tight together, but it can be a bigger size just so that it pops out to them. So if you want your name to be an 18 font, your phone number shouldn't be an 18 font, but just something to kind of make your name distinct amongst the rest of the information. So font's a different story, but size, you can definitely change it. All right, so objective versus profile. And these are kind of confusing on the top of a resume. Like, what should I put for these? They're similar, but different. All right, so for our objective, it is a brief statement that defines the type of employment you seek and or your career goals. Things that you should include in an objective is your position title or the job or field that you're looking to go into. It can include position level, name of the company to which you are applying. So some examples of this: to acquire an entry-level position as a medical assistant. Again, there you have what you're looking for, an entry-level position as a medical assistant. So you're stating the type of job you're looking for and what level you are comfortable working in. Same thing for the other 2 examples: to obtain a production manager position with supervisory responsibilities at Aramark Industries. So again, a little bit more wordier, but it gets the point across. This is what you're looking for, what the job you want, what your level of responsibility is, and where you want to work. So your profile, this is the other piece to the top of your resume. And this is a brief statement that highlights the skills and abilities you have to offer potential employers. So it's composed of 2 to 3 sentences that grab the reader's attention and summarize some of the following things. It's your most relevant experience, or those skills that you can transfer anywhere in your field, and your best personal qualities. So some example profiles: a tactical, innovative, hands-on educator with on-ground and online teaching experience. And it goes on to talk about where they've worked before, some of the other skills that they have had, how they've engaged students through active participation, and real life examples. So they're portraying some of their skills, some of the things that they've done in the past. So essentially, what is the difference? Because it's still kind of confusing, right? Objective statements say, this is what I want. This is the type of job I'm looking for. This is where I want to work. While a profile statement says, this is what I can offer you. This is my personality. These are some of my experiences. This is how I would work for you. See the difference? All right, so activity number 4. Our first question here, objective statements say what exactly? And the answer to that is, this is what I want. This is the job that I want. And profile statements, what do they say? They say, this is what I can offer you. These are the skills that I have. Perfect. All right, so speaking of skills, let's talk about how we word those. All right, so identify skills listed in the job posting that include ones you have in your resume. So you're kind of tailoring your resume to what they're looking for, if you do have those skills. So depending on your resume style, you can include them in one or more of the following sections. So in a functional resume, you can list your skills, and that's going to be the focus of your resume, is listing those skills and the things that you can bring to the table. Same thing with work experience. It's essentially the same thing, things that you've done. In the profile goes in your chronological resume, and as including work experience as well. Now remember, that's kind of listed out in order, including the jobs that you've worked before, looking at your entire career possibly in one field. Key skills to highlight including communication, teamwork, leadership, and technical proficiency. All the things that most companies are looking for. They want you to be able to communicate, so tell them how you communicate or how that's fit in with the skills and things you've done in other jobs. How you've worked as a team or independently, highlighting how you've done both in your job that you've had in the past or the skills that you've used elsewhere. Any leadership qualities, if you ran group meetings, if you produced podcasts or did an online workshop or facilitated a meeting, that's where you put it. And same thing with technical proficiency. Can you work Microsoft Word, or do you have no clue about that? Are you familiar with Mac products, and do they make sense to you? Have you used them before, and for what? Depending on which way you're going in your career. All right, so there is an example of what work experience, how you would word it. So you make a section that says work experience or skills, depending on which resume you're using. And you'll say, I was a marketing assistant at Nabisco Foods, and the dates that you may have worked there. And then you'll just give a small little blurb, couple sentences about what you did there. Work daily with marketing managers to analyze sales numbers, chart customer purchasing trends, and develop new product strategies. Those are all things that wherever you're looking for, if you're in the same field, are probably going to be looking for those skills. So make sure that you highlight them to say, hey, I've done this already. I've done it at Nabisco Foods for 14 years. All right, so activity number 5. The skills you highlight on your resume should match the ones being sought in your industry, true or false? And the answer to that is true. Of course, you want to highlight the skills on your resume that match what they're looking for. Absolutely, positively. You want an edge trying to get the job. So saying that you have the skills that they're looking for is what's going to get you in the door. Second question, skills can be placed in which of the following 3 sections of a resume? First one, work experience, education, profile, or skills? What do you think? Right, so those skills can be listed in work experience, in your profile, and your skills section. Education is just that, for your education. The other pieces of your resume are looking for your skills. They're looking for the attributes that you bring to the table, so that is where we would put them. All right, so let's talk about education and how that looks. All right, some components to consider when including your education. So include the following: your higher education degrees. Do you have a higher education degree, and which one is it if you do? Your associate, bachelor's, master's, PhD? Did you have any honors while you were acquiring your degree? Magna, summa, cum laude, any of those, make sure you put that on there. It's important. High school or the equivalency. Professional certificates, licenses, or training courses like PE certification, Six Sigma Green Belt training, ISO 9001 internal auditor training, anything that pertains to your career that other places are going to look for to see that you've done them, that you've had some higher certification, you spent time putting work into your field, they're going to want to know about. So if you are a therapist and you are licensed in the state that you live, put that on there. That's super important. They want to know those things. It's going to set you apart from maybe the people that aren't there yet. Same thing with your education. Make sure you're listing the highest that you went. You don't need to tell them about your GPA. Nobody cares. Did you graduate high school? Do you have your equivalency? Did you get a higher education? Wherever you are in any of that, they just want to know that you have education in the field that you're looking to get into or continue in, depending on your situation. All right, so this is what listing your education and credentials might look like on a resume. So you're basically putting the institution that you graduated from, what your degree or level of education was, if you did have any honors, and if there were any licenses attached to that, like professional educator and ELS license. Put that on there. Make sure, again, that they know that. That's important. You achieved it, and it has to do with the field that you're working in. And just list them in chronological order. If you have several degrees or licenses, make sure you put them all on there. They're important. All right, so activity number 6. You should only include the year that you graduated an academic institution. True or false? And the answer to that is true. They don't need to know if it took you 15 years to get a bachelor's degree. It doesn't matter. You have it. It could take you 30 years. Who cares? You got the degree. So only put the year that you graduated. That's what they're looking for. When did you graduate? That's the only thing that's important. Second question is, which of the following pieces of information should you not include for each academic institution? Is it name of the institution, the location, the degree, or your GPA? Now remember, it's what we're not supposed to include. Right, your GPA. Nobody cares that you had a 3.9 out of 4.0 or that you had a 2.6 out of 4.0. You still graduated. One way or the other, it still happened. That's what they're concerned about. Did you graduate? They don't care how you got there. All right, so let's talk about work experience. So some components to add for your work experience is the company name and location that you worked at, what your job title was, dates that you were employed, years at a minimum. If you don't remember that you started on January 5th, 1999, that's fine. Just say I worked there for 10 years. Your roles and responsibilities, which include 1 to 4 sentences or bullet points using action verbs that highlight transferable skills and abilities, whatever's easier and makes more sense and looks the neatest. And then your key accomplishments. Again, 3 to 4 major projects, awards, promotion, or activities that show your potential. What have you done? What have your roles and responsibilities done? Where did you do this? And how long were you there? So here's an example of what that might look like. So in this example, it's written out in the 3 to 4 sentence in a paragraph form, which is absolutely fine. And it's for a student teacher, language arts and science, history and reading, grades 6 and 7. Up at the top, 2009. Now, assuming that this person might still be at this place of employment, you can put 2009 to present, or again, 9 years, however you want to word it, whatever makes more sense to you, and again, keeps it neat. And the key accomplishments, you'll see on the bottom that they are bulleted, and that's totally fine as well. Some things to include as a member of a committee to create updated school mission statements. That's perfect. Those are your accomplishments. Those are some extra things that you did while working in the job that you had. All right, activity number 7. So the first question is, in the work experience section of a chronological resume, which of the following should you list? The last 1 to 3 jobs you've had, every job you've ever had in your entire life, or one job that best showcases your work experience, or all jobs relevant to the position for which you are applying. So what you want to list is the last 1 to 3 jobs that you've held, not everything else. Nobody cares that you worked at McDonald's when you were 16, unless you're still there 20 years later and you're going for a promotion. Totally irrelevant. But think about the jobs that you've had and how they relate to what you do. And really what they're looking for is the most recent. What are the experiences that make sense in what you're applying for. All right, next question. Circle the pieces of information that should be included with each job position listed. Is it name and location of company or business, city and state, employment dates, job title when you left, roles and responsibilities? All right, so essentially it's all of them. You want all of that there. The name and location of the company you worked at, including where. Some people move out of state. Did you work in Missouri for 3 years? Include it, but make sure you tell them that that job was in Missouri. The employment dates that you were there, of course, and the job title when you left, and your roles and responsibilities, super important. All right, last question here. What can you review to help you make a list of your key accomplishments? Past performance reviews, job descriptions, company websites. Again, essentially it's all of them. You can look at past performance reviews and see what you've worked on and some of the highlights of those, some of your extra accomplishments that got included, your job description. Once we do our job for so long, we kind of forget what we're not what we're supposed to be doing, but how the job is worded. And there's always those extra duties as assigned, right? So look back at the job description and look at some of the things that you've done to include on your resume. Also company websites. What does the company do? What are they known for? Make it simple so that somebody that may not know your company can figure out what it is that you did for them. All right, and some additional sections to think about. Some examples of those include volunteer work, military experience, software applications, groups and organizations, internships or externships, presentations, publications, or workshops. So one thing I want to say about volunteer work, definitely important to put on there if it pertains to some of the things that you're doing for work. If you have done it as a job that you haven't been paid for, so you've done this volunteering 20 hours a week for the past 2 years, it's like a part-time job, that needs to go in your experiences. Volunteer work as a separate section is if it was maybe once a month, just for a few hours, still relevant, still should absolutely be there to highlight some of the things that you're doing, but it wasn't like a job. It was just something that you were doing extra to gain experience and to help out, which is great, put it on there. But that belongs in a separate section, whereas one, again, that you've worked 20 hours or so, 10 hours every week for the past year, that needs to go in your experience because that was more of a job. All right, so some additional resources to help you out because although we have the resume basics down, there's still a lot that goes with it. Cover letters, they're a whole other beast. So to figure out how to write those, we do have and recommend tutor.com right through our website, hcplc.org. And here you can find help writing and structuring a cover letter. It also has resume templates, resume writing guidelines, sample resumes, so you can look at something and kind of structure yours if you're a visual person off of what you're seeing. Writing guidelines, career assessment, interview tips if you have that big interview coming up, job search information and tips if you're just not finding what you really want to do, maybe you just need help searching it a different way. And some veterans resources if you've had military experience and you're trying to fit that into civilian life. Tutor.com can absolutely help you with that. Some more topics, if needed. Citizenship, financial literacy, helping kids with homework, and GED prep if you're looking for that. Again, all of that can be found at tutor.com, and that is at hcplc.org/careers. So right now, that's all for the presentation, but if there are any questions, by all means, drop it in the chat and I'll be sure to answer them.
That was super helpful, Jen. I especially loved some of the examples that you showed. It's sometimes tricky to figure it out just by hearing about it, but seeing those examples is really helpful to get a better idea of how to get those updated. But I haven't seen any questions pop up in our chat yet. We'll continue to keep an eye on it. And did you have any last minute tips that the folks might want to know that we might not have covered in the program?
Honestly, again, the only thing I can think of is to refer folks back to tutor.com. They have great examples of resume writing and how it can be structured. That was a lot of information I just threw at you. So if you're a visual person and want to see what all of that looks like in resume form, by all means, check out tutor.com. It can be a huge help for sure.
They do have a lot of great resources in there. Probably my biggest tip that I'll give folks is when you're putting the resume together and you're reviewing it, getting ready to send it out, less is more when it comes to design. So unless you're really truly going for like a graphic design position where people are going to want to really see what you got maybe in that resume format, pretty much for all the rest of us, use very simple fonts that are easy to read and don't have a lot of colors and graphics and shiny stuff on there. Follow the keep it simple, friend rule. All right, I think that wraps us up for the evening. Thank you so much for this great presentation, Jen. I appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me tonight, guys.
And folks, we will see you online again for our programs, hcplc.org/events or at one of our branches. We'll see you soon. Have a good evening, folks.